Where did some in the tribe of Dan go to spy out new land for themselves? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Judges on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Judges 18 verses 1 to 13. Before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Judges 18 verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Judges chapter 18, beginning at verse 1. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites were seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. For until that day their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territory, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. They said to them, "Go search the land." So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. While they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here?" And he said to them, "Thus and so Micah did for me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest." So they said to him, "Please inquire of God, that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The presence of the Lord be with you on your way." So the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there, how they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. There were no rulers in the land who might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. Then the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said to them, "What is your report?" So they said, "Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not hesitate to go and enter to possess the land. When you go, you will come to a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth." And 600 men of the family of the Danites went from there, from Zorah and Eshtaol, armed with weapons of war. Then they went up and encamped in Kirjath-jearim in Judah. Therefore they call that place Mahanadan to this day. There it is, west of Kirjath-jearim. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim, and came to the house of Micah. From the beginning of chapter 18, it initially appears that these events are not connected to the events of chapter 17, but of course, such a conclusion would be a mistake as we read on further in the chapter. The time period of this chapter, as we said in the last lesson, is indeterminate, but from what is described, it cannot be too long after the time of Joshua, for these events are mentioned in passing in Joshua 19:47. Verse 1 also tells us that this event occurred when there was no king in Israel, meaning it had to occur in the days of the judges. And then, of course, the reason for these events is an indication that this occurred early on in the period of Judges, for it also says in verse 1 that the Danites were still seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. Now, from that phrase, we shouldn't assume that the tribe of Dan had no land, for all we're going to be talking about here in Judges 18 is 600 men along with their families moving out of this territory, while at the second census, the tribe of Dan totaled 64,400 men of war. Therefore, this number represents only 0.9% of the tribe of Dan at the time of the second census. Now, why wouldn't these families have received their inheritance? Well, let's remember from Judges 1, verse 34, that we were told, "And the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountains, for they would not allow them to come down to the valley." So the fact that the tribe of Dan didn't have enough land was not Joshua's fault, nor was it God's fault. It was the people of Dan's lack of faith in God that created this problem. But instead of seeking to correct the problem with the Amorites, these families in the tribe of Dan sought out new land in which to dwell. So the families in Dan sent 5 men of valor from their territory in Zorah and Eshtaol, cities we should remember from our study of Samson, to spy out the land. They didn't go into Judah, likely because that tribe was too numerous at that time, and the people fighting Judah would have fought them too had they been there. So these men traveled north, coming first into the land of Ephraim. Now they weren't intending to stay in Ephraim, but they stopped there, and when they did, they happened upon the house of Micah, whose house was likely near one of the major roads. While there, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, likely meaning that they recognized the dialect of the Levite, which would have been different than that of an Ephraimite. They asked the Levite what he was doing there, to which he said that he was the priest there. Knowing that priests can talk to God, these men asked the Levite to inquire of God to see if their journey would be successful. Now we don't know if God actually spoke through this Levite, for he did speak even through evil people at times, or if this prophet simply spoke on his own authority, but the Levite told the men that their journey would be successful, for the Lord was with them. Buoyed in spirits, these men continued on their journey north and came to Laish. Laish was in the far north of Israel, near the headwaters of the Jordan River, near Mount Hermon. It would have served as the original borders between the tribes of Naphtali and Manasseh east of the Jordan. However, from Judges 1, we know that Naphtali didn't conquer all of its land given to them, which is why the tribe of Dan was able to come up here to find land. As for the city itself, the people dwelt in safety, a feature that the Danites would be looking for. It was said that this city was far from the Sidonians and didn't have ties to the neighboring cities, meaning that in the event of battle, no allies would be coming to their rescue. Thus, if the Danites attacked, they thought they would be assured of victory. Overall, this city was a good city. It looked to be a city that would meet the Danites' needs, and so when they returned to their brethren in Zorah and Eshtaol, they recommended that they go up and take it at once, for the Lord had given it into their hands. This saying pleased these families, so they departed, and our reading today places them getting as far as just west of Kirjath Jearim in Judah before coming up to the house of Micah in Ephraim. The place where they stopped west of Kirjath Jearim they called Mahanadan, which means camp of Dan. Giving this place that name also lends credence that this occurred at least before the days of Samson, for recall that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson in this place back in Judges 13:25. This camp would have still been within the borders of Dan, but just barely, as they were approaching the territory of Judah and Benjamin. We'll continue with this story, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Judges chapter 18, verses 14 to 26, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.